So we turn now to a part of the program that I think is one of the events we look forward to every year, and that is the presentation of the James L. Mulshine Leadership Award to someone who has made a real mark on this field. It is my pleasure to introduce the recipient of last year's award. And I think he probably is known to all of you, but Dr. Andrew C. von Eschenbach, known to most of us as Andy, received last year's James L. Mulshine Leadership Award. It was able to be presented to him in person by Jim and me and by Claudia Henschke, who was also a previous recipient of the award. And there are many of us in a ballroom. It seems like forever ago, and it's just a year. But in any case, maybe we'll all be back together next year. Andy has very graciously agreed to be the presenter of this year's award. He won't be able to physically hand the award to the recipient. Jim and I will have the pleasure of doing that, but he will make the introductory remarks, and they are pre-recorded, and I will ask that they be teed up, and we hear from Andy now.
Thank you both for the privilege of presenting the James L. Mulshine Leadership Award. I'm particularly pleased that this award is being bestowed on Dr. Daniel Sullivan for his exceptional contributions as a pioneer and public servant, advancing a revolution in radiology and the advancement of functional imaging. I'm really pleased to be able to personally thank him for his extraordinary service to the National Cancer Institute and to me when I was the NCI director. Dan's an extremely humble and he's never self-serving. So it's easy to underestimate the profound influence his leadership has had in oncology by his advancing the whole field of qualitative imaging and having led a transformation in modern medicine. So it's fitting that this Quantitative Imaging Workshop is honoring him, and I'm grateful to Bo Aldeje and the Prevent Cancer Foundation for making this possible. Dan, I know you're not comfortable with others heaping praise on you, and you're quick to deflect it to others, but that's what makes you such a special person and an exemplar as a public servant. But it is also important to heap that praise on you because of your effort as a persistent pioneer. Your quiet and effective leadership of bringing a community together to apply functional imaging has served to revolutionize our entire field for discovery, development, and delivery of innovative solutions, not just for cancer patients, but for many diseases that threaten our lives and well-being. When I arrived at NCI, I found a treasure in the Division of Cancer Treatment and Diagnosis, as Dan was heading up our cancer imaging program. Coming from MD Anderson, I knew we were on the threshold of a metamorphosis in medicine, where we were moving from simply observing manifestations of disease to being able to understand fundamental mechanisms of disease. And tools like functional imaging were helping us to unravel those genetic, molecular, and cellular mechanisms because we could see them for the first time in real time. Radiology has always been an important tool in imaging the manifestations of disease by seeing the disruptions that things like cancer could cause in anatomical structures. But Dan was pioneering a new frontier in radiology, the ability to, for the first time, to visualize biology itself, not only to see the structural changes that a tumor might cause or its response to therapy, but to see its metabolic and functional response in real time and in the real world and in a real patient. Dan helped radiology go from an important tool to a vital tool. He helped begin to transform medicine. One simple example. I was aware at MD Anderson of gastrointestinal stromal tumors and the amazing impact of the advancement of kinase inhibitors. We could use a CT scan at baseline and then at 3 months be able to determine if there was tumor shrinkage. But with functional imaging, with advances like FDG PET, and the kind of pioneering work that Dan was helping make responsible, we could now assess the metabolic response of the tumor to therapy within hours or a couple days. We moved from an anatomical assessment to a biological assessment. And this ushered in the opportunity for a whole new host of tools that we describe as biomarkers and companion diagnostics. The ability to understand the impact of therapy by having a diagnostic that gave you insights into its biological behavior. One other important implication of this effort was that if you could change cycle time from waiting 3 months for a CT scan to 24, 48 hours for the results of a PET scan, you shortened the time with which you could make life-saving interventions and changes in someone's therapy. That in itself is a revolution in our ability to care for disease. But Dan's contributions went far beyond oncology. They have enabled us over time to begin to solve other mysteries, particularly, for example, the mysteries of the brain. A brain that's no longer locked away inside the skull, where we only could really examine it at autopsy. Because of the advances in functional imaging, we can now see the brain in real time and in real patients. Dan's pioneering leadership helped to create this path to the future. And it's evidenced by the workshop that you're having now, discussing the enormous advances that have occurred across the entire portfolio of imaging tools. Dan's pioneering leadership has been central to this process, not only because of his personal contributions, but because of his unique personality in being able, through his humble way, to bring all of us together and go beyond research to the evolution of new knowledge. Because of his work, if you can see more, because of quantitative imaging, you know more, and therefore we can do more. This has led to us being able to say we have reliable, measurable, reproducible, and relevant imaging biomarkers that can now be utilized by industry and, importantly, by my former agency, the Food and Drug Administration, to make decisions to bring innovative, life-saving solutions to patients. The academic community, your colleagues at NCI, industry, and most importantly, patients, all join me, Dan, in congratulating you and thanking you for accelerating the availability of innovative, life-saving solutions to the problems that plague us. You are extraordinarily worthy of this prestigious recognition, and even more importantly, you will forever be worthy and deserving of our sincere thanks. I'm sorry I can't be there in person to shake your hand and congratulate you, but know you are always one of my heroes and continue to be.
Well, thank you, Dr. von Eschenbach, for those heartfelt comments. And I kind of like those masks. But we will now have, if Dan can come up, if you could just give me a second. Andy worked very closely with Dan at the NCI, as Andy related, and was foundational in helping to set up the structures for the National Lung Screening Trial that I've mentioned a couple times already. But he left the NCI and moved on and went back to Duke, but also became involved with the direction of science at the Radiological Society of North America, where he established the Quantitative Imaging Biomarker Alliance, which I previously mentioned. And this has been very important to us in development of rational, optimal lung cancer screening. But we're only one of, I think, 28 modalities across spectrum of medicine, including brain imaging, as Dr. von Eschenbach was talking about, and everything in between. Ultrasound, elastography, optical coherence tomography, all these areas where really brilliant engineering has provided us with an opportunity to see earlier and earlier and more reliable phases of diseases across the spectrum. This is being done with, I think, about, I don't know, 1,600 participants, principally with the United States, but from Japan and across Europe. And no other nation in the world is doing this. And it is taking imaging from a very, very beautiful forest, and it's turning it into a much more productive garden. It is doing it much more systematically. It is bringing together all the stakeholders from industry, from federal regulatory communities, from the federal scientific community, from the medical community, and it's just a remarkable process. This brainchild is Dan's. Dan has done this over the last, since 2008, in a very systematic, selfless, but highly effective way. It's been just a privilege to watch. So I can, I think as Andy outlined, there's just no question how deserving Dan is of this kind of recognition, because he truly has changed medicine and science. Bo, do you want to join? So Dan, if you can come up, we would love to award you this recognition.
May I take that? Put that on the, oh, all right.
Congratulations.
Thank you very much.
And I'll put this back on the table, okay?
Why don't we get a picture of you holding it?
That's you.
Yeah. All right. Congratulations.
Thank you. Well, thank you so much, Andy, Bo, and Jim. I am so very pleased, honored, and humbled to accept this award and to join the long list of very distinguished past recipients of this honor. My contributions have been very modest in comparison. I'm very grateful to the Prevent Cancer Foundation Board for selecting me. And I want to express my sincere, deep appreciation to my countless colleagues and family members for their many years of support for all my professional activities. I've benefited from so many collaborators who've actually done all the work. Any successes attributed to me are really an indication that I managed to stay out of the way and not mess things up. When Bo Aldiger first mentioned this award to me during a phone call a few weeks ago, I thought I was not hearing correctly. But gradually my confusion changed to shock and amazement as the reality of what she was saying sank in. I particularly want to thank Andy von Eschenbach for his very kind words during the presentation. In fact, I was thinking if my wife is watching, she probably is thinking, I don't know who they're talking about. I must have clicked into the wrong Zoom meeting, maybe. But I remember so well last year when Andy was the very deserving recipient of this award. And more importantly, the unparalleled contributions that he has made to cancer prevention. For example, when Andy took office at NCI, he immediately jumped into several controversial and contentious issues that were churning around both mammography and CT screening, and exerted the strong, effective leadership that both of those contentious issues needed. I also want to acknowledge the incomparable advancements and progress that Jim Mulshine has brought to the field of lung cancer prevention. It's been my privilege to work with and learn from Jim during the past 2 decades. Receiving this award from the Cancer Prevention Foundation prompts me to spend a couple of minutes to comment on how some of the important basic concepts of prevention have been important in my personal health. I've had 5 personal episodes of cancer over the last 20 years. Colorectal, melanoma, and 3 squamous cell skin cancers, all treated successfully so far with wide surgical excision. And the prevention concepts responsible for those favorable outcomes have been education, screening, and chemoprevention. So first, education. Paying attention to early warning signs of bleeding was an essential factor in getting my colorectal cancer diagnosed at an early enough stage that a primary anastomosis was possible rather than a colostomy. My lesion was 6 centimeters long, and the standard guideline for resection would be 1 centimeter above and 1 centimeter below. And the surgeon said that would mean a colostomy. But he went on to say if I wanted to gamble, he could cheat and take just a 0.5 centimeter above and a 0.5 centimeter below, and then he could do a reanastomosis. So I agreed to the gamble, and it worked out. I'm now more than 10 years post-op with no evidence of recurrence, fortunately due to relatively early detection. The second example is screening. Because of early life sun exposure, I get annual dermatology screening exams. In 2014, my dermatologist biopsied a suspicious lesion over my right scapula, which of course I could not see and was not aware of. It was locally invasive melanoma. The wide excision that followed a month later revealed a satellite lesion about a few centimeters away. The pathologist could not say whether this was a metastasis, a synchronous primary, or a recurrence. After some debate with my dermatologist and surgeon, the pathologist, who has final say, signed out my case as recurrent melanoma. So my medical record says I have recurrent melanoma. Whether this is exactly the right category or not is debatable, but the point is that cancers progress from local to regional to systemic, and my melanoma was somewhere obviously in the regional part of that continuum. So I'm now more than 5 years out from that surgery with no evidence of tumor, and things look promising. So again, relatively early detection by screening was obviously very important to this favorable outcome. In addition to the melanoma, I've had 3 squamous cell cancers at different times over the course of many years. 2 on my forehead, 1 on my center of my nose. All were about 1 centimeter in diameter. So I had wide excisions of 3 centimeters in each case with reconstructive surgery, sort of like partial facelifts. So this is a tube of 5-fluorouracil, a cytotoxic chemotherapeutic agent. I have a standing prescription for this, and I use it for a week or 2 every few months when I become aware of dysplastic lesions emerging on my face, scalp, or arms. It's not a perfect strategy, but I know this chemoprevention has successfully treated dozens of actinic keratoses that developed in recent years, and I'm sure it's prevented the emergence of several basal or additional squamous cell cancers. So the point of these anecdotes is to emphasize that I'm a big believer in the value of education, screening, and chemoprevention to reduce the mortality from cancer. And I'm very grateful to the Prevent Cancer Foundation for all they do to promote and improve these preventive strategies. So in closing, I want to reiterate how extremely honored I am that you think I have been a contributor to this field, but I actually think of myself as much more of a beneficiary than a contributor. I applaud all of you for your passion and dedication to the goals of cancer prevention. And again, I thank you very sincerely for this honor. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dan. This is a wonderful opportunity for us to celebrate someone who's been a selfless public servant and has brought so much to all of us. Thank you.